So thanks everyone for joining. It's great to see so many attendees from across the country. It's great to see such a kind of broad representative of the community. Looking forward to hearing from you later in the questions and answer session. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Rory Cullen. I'm the Policy and Public Affairs Officer with Irish in Britain. Joined by quite a few of my colleagues here today and joined by Kat Paes from the Office of National Statistics. So as many of you will know, the census, don't need me to tell you, but the census is a really important resource for the Irish community in terms of visibility and data that we can use for the next 10 years. Irish in Britain, and as we used to be known, Federation of Irish Societies, has been working with the ONS on censuses for the last 30 years or so. So it's great to continue that relationship, and we continue to communicate with the ONS as members of the Diversity Advisory Group. So I'm just going to give a very short presentation about the different ways that you can register Irishness or record Irishness during the census, which is taking place on the 21st of March. I'm sure many of you will have seen me. I think I gave a similar slide a few weeks ago in a different forum, but some of you probably weren't there. So just like to go through this quite quickly. So there's 4 different ways to record Irishness in the census. If I make any mistakes, Kat can correct me or shed further light during her presentation. So one of the straightforward ways is there's a question about what country you were born in, and if you're born in the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland, you can put that down. Pretty straightforward. A second way is citizenship, which the ONS registers through what passports you hold. You can say you have more than one passport, and the passport prompts that it automatically gives you are UK and Irish, and then you can write down any other passports that you have. So obviously this is going to be quite a big one, I think, this year with the huge increase we've all heard about, and maybe even some of you have taken part in since the Brexit referendum 4 or 5 years ago, however long it was. So looking forward to seeing some interesting numbers in that once the figures come out in the next year or so. The third option is there's a question about national identity. Now, the prompts that are given are British, English, Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish. So you have to write in Irish at the bottom. But again, I think that's quite straightforward. And I think you can actually write in more than one identity. Now, the fourth way is the ethnic group. So this is an area that Irish in Britain and the Federation did a lot of campaigning for 20, 30 years ago. I'm sure many of you were involved in that. And there's a question that there's an option there to say that you identify as Irish within the white ethnic group. There's also an option to identify as Irish traveller or gypsy. And I think this grouping is pretty similar to how it was last time, but there is actually a new category now for Roma people. There's other options for people of mixed and multiple heritages. And there's a final option where you can write in your ethnic group if you feel like you've not been represented or in the options that are given. So those are the four ways to record Irishness. As many of you, I'm sure, have been involved in our Tick the Irish Box campaigns before. It's all been quite different this year with the kind of COVID challenges. And on that note, I will hand over to our main speaker today, who is Kat Paes from the Office of National Statistics, who we're absolutely delighted to have today. So as I said, if you have some questions for Kat or for me, please put them in the chat box. So you can click the little chat at the top, and we'll address those once Kat has finished. And then we'll come to a kind of verbal Q&A. And once if you'd like to ask a question, then please click the raise hand button and we'll do our best to get to you. But I'm now going to hand over to Kat. So thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Rory. So thank you for having me here, and thank you for everyone for signing up and taking the time out of your day to attend this. So yeah, my name is Kat Paes. I work in the community partnerships team for ONS. Basically what that means is I work with community organisations such as some of you that represent communities that might be slightly harder to reach in terms of getting them to complete the census. They might require more support. They might just not have the awareness or understanding of the census, and they might have certain barriers to actually completing the census. So this ranges from groups with disabilities groups of different ethnicities. It could even include sort of students as well, but we have a lot of work going on in our campaign to do sort of tailored work with them, and different cultures as well. So there's a whole host of different communities that we're working with, and we actually sort of term them key population groups. So that in a nutshell is kind of what I do, and I do it on a national scale across England and Wales. And I have been working on all things Census 2021 for about 2.5 years now. So it's sort of, I sort of live and breathe Census now, and it's literally just around the corner. So it is a very exciting time at the moment. So as Rory mentioned, yeah, if you do have any questions, pop them in the chat as we go along, and this will just sort of help keep the flow of the webinar of what I'm doing, and I can come to those questions at the end, no problem. Okay, so just shout if there are any problems with technology and you can't see the slides or hear me as well, just pop it in the chat box or something as well. So this is just a brief outline of kind of how it's going to go. So we've had the introduction from Rory kindly already. I'm hopefully not going to be talking at you for too long, guys, so please try and stay with me. Hopefully it will be interesting enough as well for you. And like I said, there will be Q&A time, plenty of time to talk about things at the end as well. So here's just a brief sort of whistle-stop tour of what I'm going to talk through with you guys, give you a little bit of overview of the census. I'm sure you're all sort of hot on what the census is and you're all whizzes, so I'm not going to spend too long on the first few slides going through that with you, and you will also be sent the slide deck at the end as well from Rory as well, so you can look at these things in more detail. And there are a few sort of hyperlinks as well embedded in these slides, so there'll be plenty of sort of other information resources you can access through this. So going into a brief overview, so like I said, I work for ONS. We are the largest independent producer of official stats, and we're the recognised body in the UK as well. What is a census? So I'm sure you all know it happens every 10 years. Everyone has to take part. ONS, we're responsible for England and Wales, so Northern Ireland have their own. We work very closely with Northern Ireland, and NISRA is the acronym body of the Northern Ireland census, and they're actually taking part at the same time as us. Scotland have their own census, and that's with NRS, and they are choosing to postpone theirs until next year. Ireland also have their own census as well, and I believe theirs is taking place next April. So the census is, as Rory mentioned, it is crucial and very important to giving us that snapshot about our society and giving us sort of a rough estimate of the population in our society and what it looks like. It couldn't be any more important now, as I'll sort of come into in later on in the slides, in the current pandemic and what this society looks like currently and how it's been affected. So why we have a census? So mainly it's to inform government so they can allocate resources, funding, things like that, in terms of how spend will be allocated across different local authorities, things like that as well. Ultimately, there's a huge amount of different ways that the census informs decision making across the country that can improve lives. This covers things to do with providing sort of inequality. It helps drive policy making to address the inequalities that we have. It helps to address sort of housing needs and things like that, deprivation hotspots across England and Wales as well. It will cover education. And interesting, I don't know, this is a little sort of census fact, but the first census was in 1801. And through the census, and I think it was one of the 1800s, I don't know exactly which year it was, it basically highlighted that boys in particular that were under the age of 11 were working, and their literacy was really, really bad. So they didn't have any sort of written sort of skills or anything like that. And that was sort of acknowledged through the census. And because of this, this is basically what brought about the Free School Act. And it basically made it illegal for boys under the age of 11 to work, and made free schooling for them up until the age of, I think, 13 for boys and girls. So sort of it's really interesting to sort of see how the census has ultimately drived and improved sort of the population and how we have developed. And that was around the Industrial Revolution time. So, you know, it's key to everything around us, to do with transport. It's also identified sort of like hotspot commuting patterns. So we learned that the highest commuting pattern was from sort of Brighton to London. Obviously, this isn't going to be reflected now in pandemic with everyone working from home more, but it helps us sort of develop where we need to improve motorways and things like that, as well as with a whole host of other things to do with sort of libraries, emergency services. So there's a whole host of different ways it can improve lives. And this just kind of goes into a little bit more detail as I was explaining. So it does help sort of identify the diversity disadvantages across the UK as well. Okay, so in terms of Census 2021, so literally just around the corner. We haven't got much longer left, and I can't believe how quickly it's come around now. So we'll be taking on the census day, as it were, will be Sunday, the 21st of March. This doesn't mean that you can only complete the census on this day. It will be open a few weeks before and a few weeks after, but you will be basing your data around where you would be on that day, if that makes sense. So the first time this census will be digital first. We did have online as an option in the last census, but we really are driving this forward. And to be honest, it's a good thing that we're going forward with this online strategy because of the pandemic. Everyone has had to shift online anyway, so that has worked out quite well. We will be kind of pushing people to do online as much as possible. And there's sort of a number of different benefits of that, and I'll go into that in the next few slides as well. In particular, as I mentioned, in terms of my role, I focus on those underrepresented, hard to reach groups in particular, sort of on a national level. And there will also be lots of help available for people who need to support or take part online as well as offline as well. So sort of a key message that we're really trying to get across to the general public is that their information will be kept safe, and looking at the sort of the data security around it as well, especially as it's going online, that we know that there's going to be a lot of fears around people providing this information, and especially the amount of information that we do collect in the census. So it's important that we really do get across the point that the information is kept completely anonymous for 100 years. So when the data is received in, there's some fancy statistical algorithm, I don't know how it's done, but we've got all our stats bods that basically separate the personal name from the rest of the data. So there would be no way of finding out where a particular person lives and what the characteristics are for that person. Those are only sort of married up 100 years later and then released to the national records and archives. So organisations such as Ancestry UK can then access them to provide census data. So currently we have our team working on the release of the 1921 census data. It's important to also make sure that people know that it is compulsory due to the 1920 Census Act as well. So everyone has to do it. And people can be prosecuted. Obviously, we want to go around the sort of gentle, encouraging people to do the census, but we have had instances where people have sort of gone right up until the last point of going into court for rebelling against not doing it. But that's a very small number of people that would kind of oppose to doing the census and take it sort of publicly as well. So as I mentioned, there are many benefits of doing the census online. It's easier, it's quicker. It takes about, I've gone through it myself, it takes about 20 minutes. You can do it on your phone, laptop, iPad, anything like that. You get given sort of a unique access code, and that's how you'll log in each time. So you can pause, you can come back to it later as well. We understand that the everyday person is busy doing bits and bobs, having to look after kids and go off here and everywhere. So you might not be able to complete it all in one go. We will also mean, because we're having more people completing it online, we'll actually be able to get outputs out a lot quicker. So we're looking at releasing national outputs in 2022. So I think this is loads quicker than in 2011. I think we had about a 3-year delay until we were actually able to release all the outputs. There's also, and I'll go into an example of the search as you type as well. So when you sort of start typing the first few characters, it will come up with a few examples and you can collect on that. And basically that just eradicates spelling mistakes and keeps a bit more consistency for when we do the coding and classification. So these are just a few examples, and I've put a couple of examples of the questions that I think you guys are going to be most concerned with. So we've got one on passports. As Rory mentioned, you can tick more than one. So for myself, I hold both an Irish passport and a UK passport. There's also one describing your ethnicity, and again you will have the option if you click on any, so this isn't just within the white ethnic group, any of the groups that you click on, there will be an other box, and you can then click and write in whatever ethnicity you identify as. So as I mentioned, there is a search as you type function. So for example, in the national identity, you can select all that apply, so it's not just one. And there will be an option for you to write in. So for example, if you start typing IRI, you'll see the ones that come up, and Irish is the top one, and you could just click on Irish and then it will populate the cell. So we're trying to make it a lot quicker and a lot more efficient for everyone to do as well. And as I mentioned, we're trying to make this census as inclusive as possible. Because of that, we've got 3 new questions added. One to reflect the veteran community, because there's been a public need demonstrated for that. So hopefully with this data, we're going to really be able to provide more resources, services, public health support for this community as well. And there's 2 voluntary questions on gender identity and sexual orientation. And as Rory mentioned, we've now got a new Roma tick box option added as well. So in terms of support, we've kind of got 3 different strands of how we're enumerating the communities across England and Wales. We've got your standard bricks and mortar housing. So we won't have any prior knowledge of these residents, and they'll just get the standard letter through the post. And I'll show you an example of what this letter looks like on the next slide with the digital access code. We'll then have more registered sites, and these will be sort of getting knowledge of with prior local engagement, which is currently underway at the moment with our field staff. And they'll be hand delivered paper packs, which will also have digital codes on. So if people do want to complete online, they can. But this is just due to prior knowledge of knowing that some people are not going to have that digital access in these areas. You will have then the more moving unregistered sites. And again, this is through extensive engagement with community organisations such as people like yourselves, any of the Gypsy Traveller, Roma sites as well. So we're doing a lot of engagement with communities. And I think we have got some from the Traveller Movement on this webinar. So we've done a lot of work with them, friends, family and travellers. So we're doing a lot of outreach engagement so that we can really identify where these clusters of communities are and help them complete the census. So the way that this will be done is slightly different over a transient weekend. And this is basically so that we don't capture the same person twice if they do move to a different area as well. This is an example of the letter, as I mentioned, and so you'll have the quite a long access code in the middle, but you also will have information supplied if you want any support, if you want to call to get any further guidance, if you want to request a paper pack as well, you'll have all that information to hand in that initial letter pack as well. So in terms of how we're making it accessible for all, we want everyone to be able to do it as easily as they can. So like I said, you will have paper versions that you can request, and also when you get followed up with sort of the traditional door knockers that most of you might be aware of, they will also be able to have paper questionnaires available to hand to you if needed as well. We've got things like large print, we've got a BSL video that's currently being developed to be posted on our website. There'll be options for you to be able to complete via text, via phone capture. There'll be a language support line, and we've got a whole host of translation booklets, I think in up to 49 languages. And I should mention as well that this is the first time that the census is going to be bilingual in Welsh as well. So you'll easily be able to toggle between English and Welsh, and you'll be able to complete it in Welsh as well as English. So just a sort of a high overview of the support services that we're going to be offering. There'll be a web chat option when you're completing the census online. There will be advisor support. There will be this free language line that I mentioned as well. Now, there will be census support centres. In terms of what capacity these will run, will be decided in terms of what COVID restrictions are in place at the time. When we first set up this sort of strategy, it was basically identifying that those people maybe from the older community might benefit from attending these support centres, and these would be run in sort of public places like libraries, where sort of members of the community could go and get actual face-to-face help and support with completing their census. So they could take their paper questionnaire along, or they could go and sit on a computer and get help as well. So It's not sure what capacity this will be running, but we will be having them running to some extent. There will also be online support, and like I said, we do have field staff already in place. They've been in place since last autumn, and we are currently hiring more field staff as well to be in place. So there's going to be lots of help around in the local areas. This is just an example of the translation products that we've got. And like I said, there's 49 languages with the different guidance that you can get. And we've got a whole host of engagement products as well, from posters, leaflets and things like that. And I will share coming up, there is a link embedded. So for representative organisations such as some of you, you can actually go online and you can download any of these products that you wish to use. So I would recommend the community handbook. It's quite useful because it's sort of a whistle-stop tour through everything you might need to know as a sort of a go-to place. A lot of our engagement staff will have these leaflets to hand out as well to the communities, and it's just basically building awareness. So I'm going to just go through very briefly a little bit into our campaign. So our campaign is launching this Friday, so keep an eye out on your TVs for the first advert. We've been told it'll be run a few times, so I think in between, was it Emmerdale they said, and a few other different on Channel 4 as well and things like that. So that's airing Friday night. I would have liked to show you, but it is exclusive and I've been told I can't share it with anyone external, so you're just gonna have to wait till Friday. So these are just the different ways in which the campaign is kind of targeting, and like I said, they are doing some bespoke campaigns with those communities that need a bit more tailoring. So students, we've got a school campaign that's running and it's really successful as well. It's an example of our sort of imagery that we're going to be using for sort of things like billboards and stuff like that as well. This is an example of what the student, so the whole notion behind the student campaign is to sort of create that empowering notion, so empowering students to kind of stand up and be counted. And then we've got the school campaign, which is like a resource pack that they can do, and this is actually worked out quite well with the homeschooling notion that we've got going on at the moment, because the whole premise behind us kind of wanting the objective doing of this school campaign is to kind of reach the parents. So the fact that they're actually being homeschooled, it means the parents are actually going to be getting even more involved with the census resource pack and the census activities. So homeschooling has actually helped us in this instant to get the census through and create that more awareness amongst everyone. And this is what I mentioned before. So this is a hyperlink to our website that has a whole host of different resources that you can click on. We also have sort of guidance in terms of what you might want to post on social media. It will give you sort of, a few lines that you can literally copy and paste and easily put stuff on your website, example content. So there will be an updated version of that, and there is my sort of our generic email address at the end. So if you do want any more information, you can get in touch with me. So a little bit more about engagement. So this is sort of where my work lies, and I work on the national engagement side of things. We do also have local engagement, and I'll talk a little bit more about the staff that are in place now, and you can get connected up with them. So national engagement wise, I've just included a few examples of what we've been doing over the last 2.5 years. So sort of in the early days, back in the day when you could go out and actually meet people face to face and have meetings, which was much better. There's an embarrassing picture of myself and my colleague Emily when we went to meet Muslim in Britain and basically talk to them about the census and everything like that, and they've been fully supportive and working with us ever since. We worked with people such as Age Kaimru as well, and we've done like a video meeting with the Ravadasya community. I've included a few hyperlinks because we've been working closely with Friends, Families and Travellers, the Traveller Movement, as I mentioned, and Travellers Times. We've also got an article, so that will link you through straight there, and Friends, Families and Travellers as well will link you through to a piece that was written about Roma being included as a separate tick box option. And that's just a little snippet of the article from Travellers Times there as well. So in terms of local engagement, so we've got lots of different engagement roles in place, which I'll discuss on the next slide. And basically what they're doing is what I do on a national level, but in their local area. So they'll be reaching out to local representative community organisations. So many of you might already have been contacted through one of our engagement staff, which is brilliant. And they'll be looking to kind of create that awareness. They'll be looking to run things like these webinars with their local community. They'll be looking at getting lots of postcards, posters sent out to you, and looking really to collaborate and then help support census completion when it comes around as well. So we have census engagement managers. We call them CEMs because it's a bit of a mouthful, so we do abbreviate a lot in ONS. ONS is the abbreviation. So they work with all community groups in their area. So like I said, this covers a whole host of different ethnicity groups, and this is all based off 2011 data. So they kind of get a breakdown of what their key community groups that they need to work with in their area. And this does include sort of Gypsy, Traveller, Roma populations, different ethnicities, cultures, disability groups as well, and the elderly community. They will be liaising very closely with local authorities who all have now a specific census person in their team. So they're called census liaison managers, and they have assistant census liaison managers as well, so CLMs and ACLMs. And they'll be working closely with local authorities to really help reach all the community. And this covers clustered and scattered populations. Underneath them, we have community advisors, and they work with specific populations. So they're more clustered communities. So for example, we have, so in the more urban areas, we have community advisors working with the Bengali community, we'll have them working with the Somali community, the Indian community, and so on. So some of them will have specific language skills as well. So addressing the elephant in the room, yes, we are currently going to be doing the census during a pandemic. We've decided to go ahead with it. We're confident, we're not complacent in running the census. We think there's no more important time to run the census, to be honest. I know that there have been a couple of delays in other censuses like Scotland, but to be honest, our thinking around that is that, you know, we don't know where we're going to be next year. And to be honest, it might be a different normal next year. It might not be completely reflective, even if we do defer it. So we've built a flexible operation so that we can adapt to the different restrictions that might be in place at the time of census completion. So we're confident that we can still get an accurate picture of what society looks like. To do this, we will be ensuring that we keep the public safe and also our staff safe. So I mentioned the door knockers, we will still be employing them. So we'll be having a staff amount of about 40,000 staff employed by the time census comes around. They will be fully kitted out in PPE. They will adhere to the social distancing guidelines, so they won't be able to go into people's houses, but they will be able to help on the doorstep. And like I said, if people do want to get a paper questionnaire, they will have those available to hand over and things like that. There will be plenty of support online as well. And all households, when they receive that initial letter, they'll receive some other information in there as well in terms of support too. So this is the sort of the main bit for me, is how can you guys help? How can you help spread the awareness of the census, the importance of the census ultimately, and why we need to get these more hidden communities really counted? It's you know, the national campaign that I said is launching on Friday. That's going to be really good at engaging the general public. So we're looking at about the 70% that we know will complete the census, that they won't really have any major barriers to completing the census. The ones that I work with is that 30% that need that extra help. So this is where local engagement collaboration really is crucial. So we, you know, anything from making promotional info material available to the people that you work with, helping with completion activities. So we've already had offers from different religious communities of saying, can we open up our mosques? Can we like open our temples and have those as sort of safe places where people can go and complete the census and get support and advice? Obviously, this depends on if we're in a lockdown at the time or anything like that as well. You know, signposting people towards help to their local census engagement manager, for example, and posting on social media, so tagging us Census 2021 as well, really getting that exposure up and spreading the word about census. And as I mentioned, the more people from these different communities that we can actually get working and representing us and working for the census, the more we're going to be able to actually penetrate that community and really get into that community and engage them further. So by all means, spread this link. We currently have a lot of jobs being advertised at the moment, and they're in different waves as well, so they're over different sort of lengths of time. And as I mentioned, if you do need any more information, if you'd like to find out who your local census engagement manager is, or anything else, any questions, this is our general partnerships team email address, where you can drop us a line, and my team will be monitoring that as well. If you do want to receive any newsletters and regular updates, that's also a hyperlink as well you can sign up to. And that's it. So hopefully I wasn't talking at you for too long. Hopefully I kept your attention, and I would be very pleased to just have a general discussion and chat with you and take any questions.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Kat.